Hey everyone, I am Jennifer with R&K Distributing, the company that brings you Quilter Select, Floriani, and R&K products. Andrea and I are here today to talk to you a little bit about threads. We've been getting so many questions about how to store your thread. What type of thread to use? Why are there different types of threads? What are all those numbers on the threads? What do they mean? And for new embroiderers in particular, there's a lot of, this is a whole new language for them. So Drea, if I were a brand new embroiderer, or even potentially a seasoned embroiderer, what do I need to know to start? Where do I select my threads? What do I need to have at home?
Absolutely. So one of my favorite things about thread is that it is a lot like markers or paints. You have all these options, and a lot of it comes down to preference. So our threads come in multiple different varieties. Of course, tons and tons of colors, hundreds of colors. We even do some limited releases. We'll get to that in a moment. But right here we have a small selection of each different type, just to give some visual differences and information. So I always tell people when they're starting out, your biggest thing is to make sure you're using embroidery thread for your embroidery. We all have those wooden spools and all sorts of assorted things in our boxes and bins. Those are not your embroidery threads. Make sure you are using thread for embroidery to get the best quality design possible.
And how do I know it's an embroidery thread?
Oh, well, our branded threads will tell you on them. So if it's Floriani, it will say right on there, Floriani Embroidery Thread.
Okay.
So it will tell you exactly what to look for, which I love. And while I have this beautiful spool in my hand, I want you to know that shine and that sheen that you see, this is a standard thread. This is a regular embroidery thread. It's not metallic, it's just that shiny. And I know some of you are watching this and going, yeah, Floriani is really known for that beautiful sheen and finish, but it's also a polyester thread and it is nearly indestructible, which is amazing. So we love to say that's a great place to start to get your biggest bang for your buck.
Now you mentioned that it's virtually indestructible. So the Floriani polyester embroidery thread, you can be assured that the color is going to be maintained throughout dye lots, or there are no dye lots, right? The color is the color is the color.
That's right.
But it's also bleach resistant and heat resistant, so you can embroider with confidence on things that are going to be laundered frequently if they're for children, heavy wearing items. Or also the other thing, when machine embroidery was new, rayon thread was the thing. And rayon is beautiful, it has a lovely sheen, but it's also very delicate. So you would have a lot of thread breaks, and you wanted to be careful about where on your garment your embroidery was so that you weren't rubbing against that thread all of the time. So that's really important. And I think you mentioned that it was a 40 weight thread.
Yes, absolutely. So we have a huge variety of colors in that 40 weight. It's good for a multi-purpose, a good variety of things. Comes in your standard colors, and we even have the neons too. They are hard to miss.
They're beautiful.
And that is their whole purpose, right? So when you're talking about the durability and the sturdiness and the resistance to heat, sweat, all the things, if you're someone that embroiders logos, maybe on hats for even a construction crew, somebody that's really going to use their product, Floriani thread is a great way to do it.
And speaking of commercial type embroidery, I have run this thread through my multi-needle machine successfully. It behaves beautifully. Again, that polyester is a strong fiber, so you don't experience excessive breakage. I would never say that no thread is 100% break proof. Right?
Sure.
There's always things that it's not usually about the thread. It's usually about something else that's going on in the machine.
Very true.
But I don't experience a lot of thread breaks when I'm working with my Floriani
And I've done
embroidery
industrial machines, multi-needle home machines, single needle home machines, and I can say with confidence that Floriani is very consistent and it performs great on all of those machines.
And 360 standard colors.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's absolutely beautiful.
That's almost a color a day. And then if you get into those limited colors that we release, speaking of which, we have one of these little boxes here to show. So this is what we call some of our limited release colors, right? We do these every season, every so often, and it's a set of colors that have their own numbers, their own, like you said, their own sets, and they also come with some designs and some goodies just to get you inspired to use them. But they are limited release. So if you want something exclusive, something fun, something to, believe it or not, fill in some gaps between 360 colors, you can have some of those extra design sets that come with the beautiful threads too.
So my best tip for those is always to buy 2 sets. One to have
Absolutely.
up for display because the packaging is so beautiful, and the second set is the one to actually use.
Yeah.
And I'm looking in there now, and that's 2 fours. That is 10 spools of thread. So if you were stitching out all the designs that are included, you could set up your 10 needle machine ready to go, one color for each spindle. You'd
that
think we
great?
would
Can
have
let it
planned
run.
it that way. Yeah.
That's it. So we have lots and lots of additional options and additional colors, so you can never say, "Ooh, I got them all." We always have to keep keep you on your toes, right?
Yeah.
Keep your thread mind going. So we have some other threads as well. Do you want to talk a little bit about
Yeah,
these?
let's take a look at these.
So these are some variegated threads, and I think we have a
do.
stitch out here. So if you look here, we've stitched out the word Floriani in all of these colors, and each of them has their own variegated kind of pattern. What you see over here is, of course, the thread number or name, and then here we have what it looks like. So you have some camouflage, you have some kind of fantasy colors. These are fantastic for doing something different without having to, worry about digitizing fill or anything else. They don't have that same kind of striping you see in some of the variegateds.
Yep.
They have more of kind of a twisty, more of a unique pattern in them, which I really think they're a lot of fun.
They're absolutely beautiful.
They really are.
And as a side note, if any of you are embroiderers or quilters, excuse me, if you are a free motion quilter,
Yes.
variegated thread hides so many
It sure does.
potential inconsistencies
It sure does.
in your quilting.
That's
I love
great
variegated
use.
threads.
Yeah.
I also like them when I'm doing my free motion quilting because sometimes maybe you want different colors throughout, right?
Sure.
Or one color doesn't seem to be the right color to go with that quilt. So these are absolutely perfect for
great
your free
use.
motion quilting.
Great use. So for embroidery or for quilting, if you have, that fabric that's kind of a variegated fabric or an ombre fabric and you can't quite pick, variegated is a great option to get your in-between that blends with everything. Very good
And your
idea.
decorative stitches too.
Oh yeah, we
Ooh,
love
I
a
want to go
decorative
home and
stitch.
stitch.
I know, now I'm ready to go make
Yeah,
some
exactly.
things.
And that's a 40 weight thread also.
Yes.
So when you're purchasing embroidery designs or when you're looking at embroidery designs maybe that are built into your machine, the standard throughout the embroidery industry is to digitize using 40 weight thread. So now you're going to sound very fancy when you are out buying your thread.
That's right.
But I say that because you can easily substitute your variegated threads in place of your traditional
Yes.
embroidery
Yes.
threads, and your design will still sew out the same way with the same density and quality.
Yeah, which I love. So we have this one we have stitched out so you can kind of see, and we're not going to turn the lights off for this particular moment. But if you will imagine with me, we have a glow-in-the-dark thread as well. So we have several colors in the glow-in-the-dark. They show up in this really neat pastel. They almost look matte when they're stitched, and then they are super quick to charge with the light. You turn your lights out, of course, and then you get this really neat glow-in-the-dark effect. So
Those are really fun.
they are a lot of fun. They stitch really well, really cleanly. They have a very nice feel to them, so they're not crunchy or weird. They're very smooth. And you can see here where we stitched out these glow-in-the-dark threads. So something fun can be a nice little surprise for your embroidery.
Yes.
But great way to customize things for kids of all ages.
And they are also 40 weight threads.
Yes.
So again, you can swap them out for any of the traditional embroidery designs that you're
Right.
stitching. And, a lot of people will look at these and they think Halloween. But if you envision a design with flowers on it, perhaps, going in and just accenting,
Yeah.
right, in a few places with the glow-in-the-dark threads gives you a whole different look
Absolutely.
and feel for that project.
Lots of fun. So a great way to customize things, names and accents. And I love that idea, kind of mixing it in.
Yep.
So, and it gives a little pop too, since it has kind of that matte effect.
Yes. You could even free motion quilt with it.
You absolutely could.
Imagine that, yeah.
You definitely could. I love that idea, actually. Now I kind of want to go play. That would be really sneaky if you had like a kind of white or off-white. We're going to do some fun things after this.
So
Stay tuned.
I want to go back to those kits for just a moment because
Yeah.
there is another one that's sitting here. This is the winter tiding set.
Super
I
cute.
love the colors. They are definitely wintry, sort of almost an into spring and a fall palette as we're looking at this. But I bring this one up because, we started by talking to the new embroiderer, and it can be overwhelming when you're standing in front of that wall of thread. Now, you have a couple of choices. You could just buy the whole wall of thread, right? There's no reason not to do
Why
that.
not?
You go home, you have everything you need.
Yeah.
However, if you are looking for a way to get started, these sets plus a black and a white and a gray
Yeah, these
are
are
really
great. It's a great
start, right? For
Yeah,
your
it gives
set.
you a good little color
Nice
palette.
mix. They go
And they
together.
do blend. They're
yeah,
not
just
necessarily made to go together, but just because it says, Tapestry of Curiosities or Winter Tidings doesn't mean you have to use it just for that, right?
Exactly.
You can use them for absolutely anything. But that's a great little starter, great gift too if you have friends who embroider or not sure what to do, get them, or gifts to self. We're about those as well, right?
Exactly.
So we've talked about what I call our standard thread. We've talked about variegated. We did a little peek on the neons. We have some other types as well. Do you want to talk about our metallics?
Before we talk about our metallics, I want to throw like a total wild card out there.
I'm in. Let's go.
Because we're talking about what's on top, which is that 40 weight thread.
Absolutely.
You do not want to put this in the bobbin as you're embroidered. There are a few very select times where you might choose to do that. We'll talk about that later. That's an advanced thing. But what do we put in our bobbin? I really love, a little bit of a stretch here.
Yeah.
In our Quilter Select line of threads, we have an 80 weight thread.
Absolutely.
And that 80 weight is amazing in the bobbin. Now, the higher the number, when we talk about 40 weight, 60 weight, 80 weight, the higher the number, the smaller or the finer the thread.
Right.
And so you want something fine on the bottom so that it's not building up bulk. We want something a little heavier like that 40 weight on top so that it fills in beautifully and you really can see that embroidery. So that's kind of my go-to thread is that 80 weight thread in the bobbin.
Absolutely.
And most of the time it's a neutral, a gray, a white, a black, unless I'm doing something where it will show frequently. If I were embroidering on the opening of my jacket, I would probably be a little bit more careful about what I'm matching. If it's an unlined garment. If it's lined, I'll just put the one color in there and go. Yeah.
That's great advice. Always good tips to learn. You, of course, can match and use this, but you're going to get that better result, like she said. You don't want that big bulky. So that's what I like to do as well.
All right, so metallic threads. Let's talk a little
Some
bit
people
about
are
metallic.
immediately cringing when you say metallic threads, right? These are just 2 spools of our multitude of metallic colors, but I grabbed a very light gold and a green because, well, they're pretty.
They are beautiful.
They're really pretty, and you can really feel the difference in metallic thread versus regular thread. I know, again, some metallic threads can be tricky to work with, but based on my embroidery experience, these are not metallic threads you have to go hide in your freezer and, put across the room and just hope and pray that they make it through your design. They're really easy to work with, and they have, of course, they're metallic, so they're not going to, I don't run them as fast as standard thread.
I slow it down too.
I do slow it down, but you don't really have to finagle them to get them to work. I certainly have had great experiences embroidering with them and getting some really good results.
I was delighted at how beautifully they performed in my multi-needle machine.
Yes.
Right? And I feel like if you behave in the multi-needle machine, you will behave on the single needle
That's
machine.
honestly my test as well. I have several machine options and, going from industrial to multi-needle to home use single needle and still being able to use the same threads is amazing.
It's huge.
And I feel like that's something that we've done great across our line. We've tested, we've checked, we've used, and we've developed some really phenomenal threads that you get. Just look at that shine. Like, these beautiful. Are gorgeous. And they're not just for the holidays, they're for all year. They're great to accent, great to get just a really unique result. I also want to say, and I know some of you are like, well, duh, but some people maybe won't think that way. You can always mix these threads together within your project. These might not be your 3 colors you'd pick, but you can certainly mix your types. You can use variegated, you can use metallic, you can use the standards and the neons. You can put all the goodies together and really experiment to get just a really unique design. So there's a lot of fun with that.
And this would be beautiful if you are doing walking foot type quilting.
Yes.
This is going to give you some nice sparkle down in that fabric.
Absolutely.
And look like you worked really hard.
It does.
And now one of the things that you'll notice, and it's sort of one of my tests when I'm looking at a metallic thread, is do you see how beautifully that just drapes?
It
if
does.
you pull
Looks
out
like
a
it
metallic thread and it kinks and has bends in it, you're going to struggle with that thread when you are at the machine, because those kinks and bends are going through your machine, and your machine is not going to love that necessarily.
That is great advice. So it's really nice to see that just kind of flow so well.
It's beautiful.
Now we have some other goodies up here too.
We have a couple of other threads.
Tell us, I know this is one of your favorites.
It is one of my favorites.
So this is our matte thread. We have a few that are stitched out up here. This is kind of a comparison chart of some of the different types. And you can see where it says the largest stitches in the set are matte. So that's the one on each end. And I like it because we have it on this nice black fabric. So you can see the different threads here. So the smallest ones, you have that 60 weight. So that's our standard that we were showing. Then you have the 40 weight, so 60, 40, and then matte on here. So we have some really good comparison.
Yes.
I love the way that matte pops. It doesn't have the sheen, obviously. It just has a really nice, I don't want to call it a flat look though, because it has so much pizzazz, but it's matte. I mean, I guess that's the best thing to call it, right?
So the matte thread is also a 40 weight thread, just like our traditional Floriani embroidery thread. So you could substitute it in most any commercially digitized design, and you will get the same look. You'll get the same feel. You'll get the same density of the design.
Right.
I feel like it almost has a little bit of a vintage look to the design.
Yeah, that's a great way to describe it.
It's nice if you're embroidering for, and you want the design not to be quite so feminine looking.
Yeah,
it's a nice alternative to the really shiny threads. As a quilter, I love this for free motion stitching when I'm looking for something that doesn't have all the sheen that the traditional threads do. Again, it's just a little softer of a look. If you do blanket stitch applique, satin stitch as well, but blanket stitch in particular, and you set your stitch width with a nice wide bite, it almost has a hand look.
It does,
effect.
yeah.
So I really like my matte threads for that in particular.
You can almost kind of see how that a little bit here. I love the comparison between the two because you can see, like she said, the density doesn't look any different, but it has just a different finish.
Different feel.
It's a great way to get I really love the versatility of matte thread because it can go from an heirloom look almost right into a modern all at the same time.
Yeah.
So it's a really fun one to play with.
And I have run this through my long arm machine as well, and it's stitched beautifully. Absolutely
Good to
loved
know.
it. So yeah, good to know for sure.
So yeah, this is a great example of some of these. You can see it for the lettering and then for some of the motifs as well. We have another one of these cards that shows just for visuals because we love a good visual. So this one has, you can see the variegated, the metallic, and then we have another 12 weight set. So you can see some differences. You can see how that variegated runs and how the metallic, you can still see, I love the satin stitches here. In those metallics, you can really see they're not gappy or weird.
Yep, no,
they're
look
just beautiful and look really, really nice. So, great example.
The one last thread that we have here on the machine to talk about, this is our flawless thread. This one is a 60 weight thread. I was going to call it an embroidery thread, but then I hesitated. It is an embroidery thread, but I feel like it's a quilting thread too. Although I do like my 40 weight thread for free motion quilting. If you are a newer quilter, if you are not always delighted with the way that your free motion stitching looks yet,
it happens sometimes.
Flawless thread is very, very forgiving because it is a little finer. It's 60 weight versus a 40 weight, and so the stitches themselves don't show. It's more about the texture is what you're going to see. But also, I know you use this a lot for your embroidery.
Sure do. I will embroider with all things. I am one of those, I fancy myself an experimenter with all the objects. And, you know, I can't tell you it works if I haven't tried it. But you absolutely can embroider with this embellished thread. It gives you a slightly different look, not much, just because it's a different weight, but it finishes beautifully. So don't be afraid to multi-purpose with your products. Just make sure there's a lot of information too. We're chit-chatting with you, but there's a ton of information on our website about each of these thread types, about how they work, about what they're designed for. And I always recommend that you start there and look and really see what it's supposed to do. That's your starting point. Sometimes you can make it do something else, but we have tried all of these in all the ways we've mentioned, and you can do a lot with them.
And this 60, one of the places, in addition to free motion quilting, when I don't want my stitches to show, or to be the main attraction, is it is a great way to stitch out lettering and small text when you're embroidering, because it's a finer thread. It doesn't feel quite so much, and so the text tends to be crisper and clearer
Yes.
when we are stitching it out with our 60
It's a
weight
great
thread.
tip. Just think about it like a pen or a marker. If you're writing, with a pen or a marker and you're trying to write small, you don't use a wider pen or marker. You want something
hold it up
finer.
over the paper a little
Sometimes
bit.
we don't think that way with thread. We're like, oh, this looks terrible. Oh, it's a horrible design. Well, no, you're using too big of a thread.
Yeah.
So that's another great tip for that embellished thread.
And the matte and the flawless also are bleach and heat resistant, just
Yes.
like our traditional Floriani threads
Yeah.
are. So, ooh, that was a lot of information. But I do have one more thing. We
Yeah.
talked about, I do have them. When you're choosing colors and you're standing in front of that thread wall thinking, what do I do? Where do I start? We have a matte and a flawless thread collection.
Pretty.
That's a nice grouping to get you started. There is a row of neutrals, what I would call neutrals,
Yep.
some pastel colors, and some brights
richer
that are
bright
in here.
jewel, yeah.
Same thing for the flawless collection. It's 15 spools of neutrals, brights, and pastels, so that you have a good palette to select from as you're getting started with these types
It's
of
a
threads.
great mix.
Aren't they pretty?
That's really nice.
wanna
So you
get
do
that.
have options. If you're looking at this and going, oh no, I need to buy a bazillion colors of thread. Well, sure. But we do have some set options that you can get from your retailer. That way you can start in and get kind of a mini collection and work your way up to that huge wall of goodness.
Absolutely. Tell us some great information.
Yeah.
If you have questions about any of the things that we have talked about, please reach out to us in the comment section below and let us know what thread information you would like to have us bring to you.
Absolutely. These are the people that, not the only people, but these are some of the people that are answering those questions. So we want to hear from you. We encourage you to share your thoughts, your feedback, your things you'd like to see with us. And we can't wait to hear from you and see what you create.